This deep dive is presented by Bluewater Auto Restoration.
Welcome back, everyone. This is week 43 of the 2025 Bluewater Auto Restoration podcast. We take a stack of source material, we tear it apart, and we try to extract the crucial insights you need to be well informed. Just a reminder, we release these new deep dives every Saturday morning.
And this week, we are embarking on a really fascinating journey, a high-octane journey into what we're calling the gasoline ghosts, these magnificent American car brands that are, long gone. But their engineering, their sheer audacity sometimes, still leaves such an indelible mark on history.
Absolutely. Our mission today is a real deep dive into gasoline ghosts, the myths and legends behind lost car brands. And we're not just, listing the failures. We want to pull apart the corporate decisions, the economic pressures, the engineering gambles that cause these incredible names to just vanish. It's a fundamental look, really, at innovation versus capitalization in American industry. Yeah, and they're often quite tragic stories, aren't they? You see this engineering brilliance meeting, just brutal financial reality. Many of these defunct brands, they represented the absolute peak of innovation at their time, sometimes with more daring designs, maybe even superior mechanics than the giants who ultimately survived. They didn't fail because they couldn't build a better car, necessarily. They failed because they couldn't withstand the sheer financial weight of corporate America.
Okay, let's unpack this then and get right into the material. We've got 5 incredible brands to explore today. Each one represents a really distinct era and a different kind of market struggle. Packard, Studebaker, DeSoto, Duesenberg, and the ultimate defiant independent, AMC. We should probably start where everything was built without compromise, right?
Indeed. Yeah, let's begin right at the zenith of American luxury, an era of almost unrestrained opulence and technical achievement that honestly set global performance standards back then.
Right. When you talk about performance and exclusivity, Duesenberg has to be the first word. Founded 1913, Auburn, Indiana. They occupied a niche so small it was almost like exclusive to royalty, movie stars, industrial barons, that kind of thing. They felt less like a car manufacturer and more like a supplier of these custom-built roll-in chassis designed to be the absolute fastest, most luxurious things on the road.
Yeah, the Duesenberg brothers, Fred and Augie, they were steeped in racing. And that engineering background, it just defined everything they built, particularly the legendary Model J. And think about the lasting power of that phrase, it's a doozy.
Right.
Like you said, this wasn't just marketing spin. It was a linguistic shortcut for saying something was the absolute pinnacle, the best quality, the top performance. And they earned it through success on the track and just the sheer prestige of the car itself.
And the technical details really explain that prestige, don't they? We talk about engineering marvels, but let's be specific here. They were early adopters of the dual overhead cam, or DOHC, straight 8 engines. Now, maybe for the listener, why was DOHC so revolutionary back in the, 1920s and 30s?
Oh, that's a crucial technical point. Yeah.
Yeah.
At the time, most engines relied on, simpler designs, flat head or single overhead cam setups. And those limited valve size, valve timing, which basically capped the potential horsepower you could get. Duesenberg's DOHC setup, it allowed for much superior engine breathing, better cooling, and that dramatically increased efficiency and power output. This is how they achieved just phenomenal performance figures. I mean, sometimes pushing 265 horsepower naturally aspirated, that was simply staggering for the era.
That's basically race car technology in a luxury sedan. And they also adopted early hydraulic brakes, which must have been a massive safety advantage when their cars were already hitting speeds, well over 100 miles per hour?
Absolutely essential at those speeds. And for those who demanded the absolute ultimate, they produced the supercharged models, the SJ, and the incredibly rare short wheelbase SSJ.
Wow. Supercharged.
So supercharged engines, they push power towards 320 horsepower. I mean, they were literal rockets for the road. But, that brings us right to the fatal economic flaw. Their entire approach was fundamentally based on extremely low volume and incredibly high customization. Each car was essentially a bespoke project, costing the equivalent of, a dozen middle-class homes back then.
So was the fatal flaw the market itself drying up, or was it maybe Duesenberg's inability to, streamline production even slightly, to weather that inevitable downturn? Could they have pivoted, maybe to military or industrial engines like some other luxury makers did during wartime?
That really is the core tragedy, isn't it? The structure of the company, which was anchored by E.L. Cord Corporation, it just didn't allow for that kind of strategic pivot. They weren't set up for it. They were only ever focused on that ultra niche market. So when the Great Depression tightened its grip, that tiny market, didn't matter how loyal it was, It just evaporated. They couldn't liquidate inventory fast enough, couldn't pivot to a cheaper product line. Duesenberg just collapsed in 1937. It's stark proof that the best engineering in the world doesn't matter if your business model relies entirely on a perpetually booming economy.
Hmm. But the legacy absolutely endures. I mean, today, Duesenbergs are the benchmark for 1930s opulence, right? They anchor major collector concours events like Pebble Beach. And when they appear at auction, they often set records. They really are the ghosts of the Gilded Age. Unattainable symbols of automotive perfection.
Absolutely. Now, if Duesenberg represented that uncompromising, almost impossible opulence, Packard, well, Packard was the standard of craftsmanship for the, let's say, the broader established elite. Founded earlier, 1899, Packard represented consistent quality, a sort of conservative luxury, and really advanced engineering out of Warren, Ohio.
Yeah, and their iconic advertising line captured their brand perfectly. Ask the man who owns one.
Ugh.
That wasn't just a slogan, was it? It was like a testament to their quality control, their customer retention. People who bought Packards, apparently, rarely switched brands because the reliability and refinement were just that good. We're talking legendary models like the stately Packard 12 and the luxurious later Caribbean.
Oh, Packard was definitely an engineering powerhouse. They often led even in the crowded luxury segment. They were the first American manufacturer to offer a production V12 engine, which was a crucial advantage in delivering smooth, effortless power. And they pioneered comfort features too, introducing early air conditioning as far back as 1940. Can you imagine AC in a car in 1940?
Incredible. Post-war, though, they seem to be desperately trying to cling to that technological lead, especially against the mass market scale of Cadillac and Lincoln.
They were, absolutely. In 1955, they rolled out the revolutionary torsion-level suspension. Now, this was an incredibly advanced self-leveling system designed to smooth the ride regardless of the load in the car. It was highly complex, incredibly expensive to manufacture, but it really demonstrated Packard's commitment to engineering superiority right to the end.
But Packard kind of proves that engineering brilliance can survive a depression, only to be killed later by maybe ambition and corporate mismanagement. What was the specific corporate ambition or misstep that proved fatal? This is where it gets really interesting, I think.
Well, the fatal flaw, or perhaps the beginning of the end, was their unwavering commitment to high quality. It sounds good, right?
Oh, right.
But it translated to very high post-war production costs. This made their pricing increasingly uncompetitive, especially against Cadillac, which benefited hugely from GM's massive economy of scale. And critically, the response to this pressure was the disastrous 1954 merger with Studebaker.
Right. The idea on paper was to combine Packard's prestige and engineering know-how with Studebaker's higher volume and dealer network to achieve the scale needed to fight the big three.
Makes sense, kind of.
That was the theory, yes. But in practice, the merger effectively destroyed Packard. See, Packard desperately needed cash to modernize its expensive manufacturing process, and Studebaker also needed cash for its own modernization. The merged entity, the Studebaker-Packard Corporation, had neither in sufficient quantity, so instead of gaining strength, the merger basically combined two financial weaknesses. And almost immediately, the association diluted the prestige of the Packard name, the very thing its customers were paying that premium for. So once that aura of exclusivity was gone, they were just another expensive car competing against giants.
Exactly. They couldn't shake that perception, that downdraft. And the financial drain was immediate and ultimately terminal. The last real Packard rolled off the line in 1958. Yet, surviving examples are still beloved today for that mechanical refinement, that timeless elegance. The story of Packard is really the story of a high-quality product that just couldn't adapt its production costs fast enough to survive the realities of the post-war industrial landscape.
Okay, moving from the sort of rarefied air of luxury collapse, let's look at the brands that really fought it out in the mainstream, trying to adapt, trying to survive. And Studebaker, wow, with its roots stretching way back to 1852 in horse-drawn wagons. That's one of the most unique narratives in American industry, isn't it?
It's a remarkable transition story.
Absolutely.
They managed to pivot from wagons to cars in 1902, basically mastering 2 centuries of transport technology. But their biggest fight, consistently, was against the sheer monolithic scale of Ford, GM, and Chrysler, the big three. Studebaker had to rely heavily on, well, unique design and often ahead of its time safety and engineering just to carve out a niche for themselves.
And they definitely gave us some truly memorable, maybe polarizing aesthetics. I'm thinking immediately of that instantly recognizable bullet nose design from the late 40s, early 50s. I mean, whether you loved it or hated it, you knew it was a Studebaker. And this desire for distinctiveness drove models like the Champion, the Commander, and the Beautiful Hawk series later on.
And this commitment to flair, maybe even risk-taking in design, led to their greatest and perhaps final, really innovative gesture, the Avanti. When it was introduced in 1963, the Avanti was just a total shockwave. It was a true American Grand Tourer designed by the famous Raymond Loewy, and it featured a revolutionary, highly stylized fiberglass body.
Fiberglass. That must have been a huge risk for a major manufacturer back then. Wasn't it mostly associated with really niche sports cars, not mass production?
It absolutely was, and that risk extended to the technology inside too. The Avanti was one of the very earliest American cars to use Bendix disc brakes on all four wheels as standard equipment. Studebaker was basically putting out a safety and performance manifesto with that car, trying to prove they could out-innovate Detroit, even on a smaller budget.
But despite the brilliance of the Avanti, I mean, it's an icon today, it didn't save them. So why did consistently great design, some real innovation, and, over a century of history fail to keep Studebaker afloat?
Well, this is almost a textbook example of corporate distress where external factors just became overwhelming in the end. Studebaker suffered from chronic financial instability. A lot of that stemmed from poor management decisions dating back to the late 50s, and of course the devastating financial consequences of that Packard merger we just talked about. They simply lacked the capital for necessary manufacturing upgrades to compete on cost. The big three could just outspend them massively on redesigns, on marketing, and most importantly on competitive pricing. They could afford price wars that Studebaker couldn't.
So they were constantly playing catch-up, and every little sales slump was probably a major crisis for them, whereas GM or Ford could just absorb those kinds of losses much more easily.
Precisely. They just couldn't sustain production against such powerful, entrenched competition. Studebaker finally ceased car production in 1966. However, the ghost, as you say, absolutely refuses to die. The Studebaker Drivers Club maintains an incredibly active following even today, and the Avanti design itself was so compelling that it continued to be produced, believe it or not, under various successor companies for